Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm Nathan Hager. The U.S. market is closed for the Thanksgiving Day holiday. Coming up this hour, we will look at how the retailers are doing as we approach the holiday shopping season, beginning with Black Friday. Plus, we'll get an update on some big antitrust cases, including the Justice Department's lawsuit against Google. Also, is there room for seconds at the Thanksgiving feast? We'll look at the Ozempic effect on the holiday meal. First, though, let's dig into what's driving the market and talk about oil, because crude has been on quite a ride. We've seen about a $30 swing in the price of a barrel this year. There are a lot of factors at play, among them wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, and of course the ongoing recovery from the pandemic. So for more on what's in store for the energy space, we have an expert roundtable set up for you. John Kilduff is with us on the phone. He is the founding partner at Again Capital, and Stephen Shork is joining us on Zoom. Stephen is president of the Shork Group. Thanks to both of you for being with us on this holiday. And I'll start with you, John, because it wasn't that long ago we were talking about the return of $100 a barrel oil. Now we're quite a ways off from that. What happened?
Well, basically, the sum of our worst fears for the market just never materialized. With the initiation of the Ukraine war, was thought to put meaningful amounts of Russian supplies of crude oil and refined products at jeopardy, to be embargoed by the West, that they wouldn't be purchased. Meanwhile, they found a home almost immediately in China and India and Turkey to a lesser extent. And then, from there, a similar situation here with the situation in Gaza. Fears about, all kinds of a parade of horribles, about the Strait of Hormuz getting shut, Iran getting involved. And meanwhile, really the unfortunate situation has been very much contained to Gaza, no regional spillover, and certainly no threat to any supplies of oil. So once those geopolitical risk premiums dissolved, we're back to dealing with relative even or oversupply, and worries about the main other factor in this market, which is demand, and China and the situation with their lackluster economy, their property market situation being deteriorating, and of course even Japan now showing significant economic weakness and demand for oil.
Is that how you see things, Stephen? Is risk premium off the table? Is there a risk it returns?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I never even thought risk premium was adequately priced in for the few days that we actually saw a pop post October 7th. So I am quite perplexed that there is no risk premium. And in fact, there's now a discount being priced into the market. It is just amazing to me that the market continues to ignore what is going on. This is a war, not between Israel and Hamas. This is not a military conflict. This is not a police action. This is a war. This is a war between Israel and, let's face it, Iran. The Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis have all declared war on Israel, i.e. the West. So that is Iran. And the fact that we have 40% of the world's waterborne oil that flows through a 40-mile Strait of Hormuz, and people refuse to factor that in, I think the market's taking a tremendous risk. So the theme coming into this year was China, 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 to quote our Jan Brady here, and with all of that demand. And, China never materialized. China, quite frankly, to me, looks like Japan circa early 1990s. The curtain is being pulled back on that regime and on that economy. So now going into the new year, there are legitimate concerns. Whether is China really the tiger of the Far East, or is it now just a paper tiger?
He raises an interesting point, John. Is this market underpricing the potential for risk premium to return? And what about the fundamentals going into 2024?
Well, I think you would need to see a real escalation here. I mean, for me, and I don't mean to be, anything less than, this is a horrible situation. But look, Hamas kind of got left hanging by Iran and by, Hezbollah in the north. The Hamas thought that these other parties would come in on their side and really make this make this the situation. And if that had happened, then everything Stephen just said, and I would have been right on board with that, we would have had material amounts of crude oil at risk. And, for whatever reason, the calculation just wasn't there. I don't know whose miscalculation it was. It sounds like it was Hamas's, because they're not getting the support right now that they expected. They're getting pinprick sort of dust-ups in various parts of Syria and other places by Iran, which they're getting hit back with. But again, no material amounts of oil. The fundamentals, though, are interesting, and certainly it's hard to make an argument for prices to go much lower because of what the Saudi Arabia has been doing with their output policy and OPEC Plus overall. Once again, OPEC Plus has fallen short of their lofty goals, but the Saudis haven't. They have delivered. They're only producing 9 million barrels a day. Can you imagine that the United States produces 30% more oil right now than Saudi Arabia does? Yep, that's the case. And Saudi exports are down. So, there's a potential for relative tightness emerging, but again, without China getting back into a groove of growth, it's hard to see prices materially going higher either.
I think I hear you want to pop in there, Stephen. What's your view on whether the Saudis continue with these supply cuts that we've seen over the last couple of months?
Oh yeah, no, I'm certainly on board with John that with regard to first the geopolitics, that it is a wait and see market, right? We know everyone knows that risk's there, but no one's willing to price it in, and therefore we're going to have to wait. It certainly is a concern with Saudi Arabia, and let's keep in mind, the Sunni Saudis and the Shia Persians don't necessarily agree on. I mean, they really hate one another. I mean, let's be honest here. And the fact that the Saudis are doing what they can to keep prices higher with regard to production, yeah, I do see that. I agree with John. I do see that going forward, that they are sticking to their guns. And I think they're going to continue to stick to their guns, because when we look at the spread action, difference between prices in the near term versus prices longer out along the curve, we're going into a situation where pricing on the front end of the curve is signaling to the market that it is oversupplied relative to demand. I want to say in crude oil. You're not seeing that dynamic playing out in gasoline, which is very interesting because gasoline demand is strong, as we know. For this holiday, we're looking at one of the strongest holiday seasons since, certainly in the post-COVID start. And so the gasoline spreads are tightening. So there seems to be some concern with regard to supply in that manner. But the overall global market, when we see how the spreads have really started to come down the front end, OPEC watches this stuff. So the formation of the forward curve is very important. I'm friends and I work with OPEC. I do know they put a lot of emphasis on this. Therefore, with the spreads collapsing, Saudi Arabia, if they're going to make any move, would probably in the new year, if the spreads stay the way they are, they'll probably cut rather than add production going into 2024.
Is that how you see it as well, John? And if Saudi Arabia does continue to cut, does the rest of OPEC Plus follow?
The Saudis have certainly, put their shoulder to the wheel here. The new the energy minister, Mohammed bin Salman, has, delivered lollipops, and they want a higher price. They need to pay for NEOM and their other aspirations for their country, and they want oil prices closer to 100. The question I have, though, is that are we getting closer to the point in the cycle where the Saudis throw a fit again, like they did back in 2020, right before COVID hit, and flooded the market to collapse the price to try to squeeze out higher cost producers, which they're kind of suffering from right now. Part of their problem is the United States with the 12 million barrels per day of production and about 5 million barrels per day, we're pushing on it anyway, of daily crude oil exports. So we're making their job a lot harder as the years go by here. We'll see if that persists. But I do believe the Saudis want higher prices, and I do think they're willing to take one or more for the team to succeed in that endeavor. And so, yes, I'm with Stephen on that they're more than likely to cut right now until they finally throw that fit and collapse the market.
Stephen, what about the impact of central banks and demand? Can prices grind higher when we could potentially see interest rates fall and the potential for a slow in demand, depending on how this economy goes into 2024?
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. And really, I'm perplexed. I'm impressed with the U.S. economy when we consider that consumer spending is 70% of the economy. And we're looking at 18 consecutive months of credit card debt well over $1 trillion with interest rates on those credit cards at 22%. When we look at savings rates, that we've all gone through all of the savings or the income or the cash that was printed by the U.S. government. We no longer have those savings. So I don't know where the juice from the consumer is coming from, but it's there. So certainly if we do see, if rate rises have indeed been cut, we've seen the end of it. I'm skeptical on that. But if we have, and to your point, if we do start to see interest rates coming back, well, heck, if the U.S. consumer can spend in a 22% credit card interest environment, you start bringing those down a few hundred basis points, then I can see this certainly being a catalyst that will be that next tranche, that next demand driver that can certainly propel oil prices higher into the new year.
Thanks for this look at what could be driving oil prices into 2024. That was Stephen Schork, the president of the Schork Group, joining us on Zoom, and John Kilduff, founding partner at Again Capital, with us on the phone on this special Thanksgiving Day edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. And straight ahead, we'll get you set for Black Friday. We'll look ahead to the holiday shopping season with Bert Flickinger of Strategic Resource Group. It's 18 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back to this special edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. The U.S. markets are closed for the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm Nathan Hager. And retailers, well, they're open and entering their most crucial time of the year. For many, it has already begun with Black Friday sales underway. And for more on the kickoff of holiday shopping season, we welcome Bert Flickinger, Managing Director at Strategic Resource Group. Bert, this time of year is always big for retail, but how big is this year's holiday shopping season, particularly when you think about companies like Walmart warning about the consumer outlook heading into next year?
Nathan, happy Thanksgiving Day. And there is some concerns with Walmart and everyone else that while retail sales will be up 3 to 3.5% over the holiday season and this Black Friday weekend, overall adjusted for inflation, sales are flat. And on the Bloomberg terminal, the University of Michigan consumer sentiment's near a 12-month low, and that's all due to inflation and people, 60% of people going paycheck to paycheck and carrying a lot of consumer debt.
So does that have you thinking that a lot of shoppers are going to be going into more of the lower end retail chains as opposed to some of the higher end locations?
Yes, Nathan. The U.S. Department of Commerce is reporting that anything's food-based, like you said, Walmart, Costco, Kroger, will do well, but the category dominant areas of the business, home improvement, furniture, sporting goods, electronics, are all trending down, even not before they're adjusted for inflation. So the consumer spending, but the consumer's cautious. And my alma mater, PricewaterhouseCoopers, said almost all the spending increases are coming from the top 20% of people in the disposable income ladder.
So what does that mean when it comes to the kind of deals that we're used to seeing on Black Friday? If the thinking is that a lot of shoppers are looking more toward the lower end, more of the staples, does that mean we're going to see deeper discounts on some of those like consumer tech items that you usually think about selling really well around Black Friday and beyond?
Yes, you'll see better deals because Walmart, Target, and others are still carrying 10 to 15% more inventory than they were pre-pandemic. And all the retailers really started their Black Friday holiday sales programs either right after Labor Day or right after Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day. So the deals have been out there for a long time, and a lot of the people's shopping has already been done. So PricewaterhouseCoopers is saying about 42% of the shopping is going to be done online, 41% in store, and the remaining 17% click and collect. But a lot of the shopping's been completed, except at Macy's with the Thanksgiving Day parade right near Bloomberg's World Headquarters, doing well. And this is their big day is with the Macy's parade is Thanksgiving Day.
Well, if so much of the shopping has already been done even before Black Friday, what kind of impact could some of these Black Friday discounts even have?
Nathan, to your excellent point, de minimis impact, because we're overstored in the suburbs and understored in the cities or the urban areas. So it's up to the Federal Trade Commission, and Exhibit A is letting Kroger and Albertsons merge to protect unionized employers and unionized jobs. And it was confirmed by John and Margot Katzmatidis from Gristedes and D'Agostino after they and teammates gave out 10,000 turkeys. We talked to Democratic National Committee Chair Ed Rendell, Governor David Patterson, and Senator Malcolm Smith, and John and Margot Katzmatidis, and they said it's really up to the government to let the chains, especially the Krogers of the world that are unionized, continue to operate and expand in the urban areas as well as suburban and rural areas, because Walmart and Amazon have been subsidized in the cities. And as soon as the government subsidies run out, Walmart tends to close and exit the urban areas, as they did ignominiously in the south and west side of Chicago before this 2023 holiday season.
Speaking with Bert Flickinger, the managing director of Strategic Resource Group, how do you expect this particular holiday shopping kickoff to compare to years past, when we think about so much of the consumer running out of excess savings, relying more on credit cards? How is that going to play out when it compares to some past Black Fridays?
Hey, as it plays out, Nathan, it's buy now, pay later. PwC said that 15% of the purchases for this Black Friday weekend and Small Business Saturday and 2 days, and Cyber Monday and 4 days, it's going to be buy now, pay later. 15% of all purchases will be that way. And consumers are still taking on credit card debt, but 63% of consumers will be buying with debit cards, so instant cash to the retailers, and trying to put less on credit as interest rates have climbed, and the average household has $17,000 in revolving unpaid credit card debt.
What's the read-through to retailers' bottom lines, their profit margins, if we do see more consumers relying on buy now, pay later?
The retailers' bottom lines will be under pressure because about 3% of consumers are defaulting on credit card debt of some sort, car loans, retail credit card debt, et cetera. So retailers will have a solid sales season, flat, adjusted for inflation. Profit will be good, but not great. But the real concern is the upcoming calendar year going into the election cycle of 2024.
Yeah, I did want to get into what this holiday shopping season kickoff means in terms of momentum for retailers. Do you see the momentum growing for retailers once we get past this season, or are there further headwinds?
The momentum's growing, and interestingly, Nathan, part of it is following the Bloomberg terminal. If a company like Bed Bath & Beyond files for bankruptcy, or Toys R Us earlier filed for bankruptcy and liquidation, who picks up the business? So Macy's and Target have done a terrific job picking up the toy business, especially Macy's, which on the Bloomberg terminal reported very good earnings. It's so expensive to feed a family of four for over $50 at McDonald's that for the first time in decades, more people are buying food at Walmart, Kroger, Costco, and cooking and entertaining at home because it's unaffordable to go out. So that shift in terms of consumers, regardless of income, are all smart shoppers, and they're shopping more to buy and serve and stay at home rather than go out, where our family was one of the largest food service suppliers to the restaurant industry. And the food service restaurant industry, Nathan, marks up the food about 300%, marks up the beverages about 700%. For a $15 Big Mac meal at McDonald's, that same meal could be bought at Kroger or Costco or Walmart for about $1 per person.
So just quickly, it looks like we're hearing a lot more, thinking about a lot more picking and choosing for this holiday shopping season, perhaps, than in years past.
Yes, a lot more cautious, careful shopping, but ultimately, retail has gone from 400% overstored 15 years ago to only about 100% overstored, and in the urban areas, we're 20 to 30 to sometimes 40% understored. So the big opportunity is urban retail, and that's where Kroger and the unionized companies to locally Gristedes and D'Agostino's and Morton Williams and Fairway have done it particularly well.
All right, Bert Flickinger, thanks for this. That's Bert Flickinger, managing partner at Strategic Resource Group. And still ahead on this Thanksgiving edition of Bloomberg Daybreak, we'll take the pulse of some key antitrust cases in a busy year for the Justice Department against corporate America. It's 35 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back to this special Thanksgiving edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. markets are closed for the holiday. 2023 has been a very busy year for the Justice Department. It's in the middle of a number of high-profile trials aimed at limiting consolidation in corporate America. So who better to get you caught up on these cases than Bloomberg Intelligence senior litigation analyst Jennifer Rhee. Jen, thanks for being with us on this holiday, taking a bit of a break from what has been a very busy time for you, particularly thinking about Google and these cases against that company and its parent, Alphabet. Let's start with the one that's been going on for quite a while, with the Justice Department taking on Google over its dominance in search. What are the allegations there? Where do things stand?
Yeah, that is a big one. And some are even calling that one the antitrust trial of the century. I don't know if when all is said and done, all that fanfare is going to be worth it. But this trial just ended November 16th. But closing arguments aren't set until early May. So it's going to be some time before. Yeah, really. This judge is taking it very seriously. There was a lot of evidence introduced in the trial, and I think he's going to carefully parse through it all before making any decisions and having those closing arguments. But here, what the DOJ has accused Google of doing is illegally maintaining a monopoly in search and a couple different search advertising markets, because they have these agreements with Apple and makers of Android mobile devices where they're spending a lot of money, $26 billion, we heard, in 2022, for Google search to be set as the default. So what it means is that if somebody buys a phone, they buy an Android phone, and you go right in and you go into Safari, let's say, Google is set as your default, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, and you do your search, and that's what you're using. And so they're able to then get all the revenue from the advertising that comes up from that search. And the DOJ is basically saying, look, Google's tied up everything with these agreements. And if Bing and DuckDuckGo can't get in there, they can't improve, because you need the data to improve, and you get the data by having more and more people do a search on your service.
And we've had, in the course of this case, a lot of numbers revealed almost reluctantly by the parties involved in how much has been spent to keep Google at the top of the search list. But when we have so much time between the end of the arguments and the closing arguments in this case, what are we expecting from this judge after all this time pouring through all the evidence?
He said himself that he has absolutely no idea how he's going to rule. And I suppose that's what he should say, because he needs to spend the time to look at the precedent and look at all the evidence before he makes up his mind. I mean, my feeling is that I lean a bit here toward the DOJ. I think the DOJ introduced really compelling evidence that it is very difficult for other search engines to be able to develop and be able to compete with Google having all of these agreements for default. And even though people can change that, it's not completely foreclosing. You can go in and change your default to Bing, but they had these experts in behavioral economics that basically showed that in many instances, people simply don't change a default if they don't know about it, or if they have to do some research or work to figure out how to do it. They just don't do it.
Right.
And Google's paying $26 billion. So obviously there's a lot of value in being the default.
Yeah, I mean, for so many people, Google and search are almost synonymous. I mean, if the Justice Department ends up winning out in this case, it's going to be a pretty big sea change, not just for the tech industry, but for the people who use it, wouldn't it?
Well, it may and it may not. You talk about really these trials being so protracted. We probably won't get a decision, given closing arguments in May, until I'd say early early in the second half of next year. And this is only halfway through this process because the trial that just ended was only on liability. In other words, did Google violate the laws? Did they do something illegal? If it is determined that it did, there will be a whole second trial on what the appropriate remedy is. So you're looking at possibly not even getting an answer to that question until late 2024, maybe early 2025. I doubt a remedy would be so drastic as to do something like break up Google, force it to sell off Google Search or sell off Chrome or something like that. I suspect it would be more like something like sharing the data with rivals or creating a choice screen like Google's been forced to do in Europe.
Now, along with this case involving the Justice Department, Google is facing another matter, a lawsuit from Epic Games.
Right.
Tell us more about where that one stands as well.
Right. So this one just started, and it's going to go through toward the end of December. It is just private. We did have state attorneys general involved, but they have settled with Google. Basically, everybody who was a plaintiff in this case, except Epic Games, has settled the case. And what Epic Games really objects to are Google's policies and strategies to force buyers of the Android mobile devices to download apps through Google's Play Store and not outside of the Play Store. And any kind of app purchases or in-app purchases have to be made through the Play Store, and Google services that payment. And so what Epic says is this allows Google to charge developers really an unfairly high fee every time somebody's buying an app. Epic would like access. They tried this with Apple. They want to be an app store themselves and distribute apps on mobile devices. They've tried this with Apple. They're now trying this with Google to get in there so that they can be an app store and they can service the payments themselves.
Well, the last time Epic tried something like this with Apple and ended up losing. Why does it think it stands a better chance this time around?
Right. And it mostly lost. There was one little piece in which Epic won, but really what it was going for, it lost. There's some differences. The biggest difference here is that Apple's case was before a jury and Apple's case was before a judge. Google's case is before a jury. And I think that really could cause a difference because a judge is going to focus on the very technical requirements of what a plaintiff has to prove to show illegal monopoly maintenance. And there are a lot of technical hurdles a plaintiff has to get over. It's difficult to win. A jury may be a little less focused on that. If the plaintiffs can portray Google as a bully here or doing something unfair, maybe that'll sway a jury. And they'll focus less on whether or not Epic's met those technical requirements and more on Google's conduct. So maybe Epic feels it has a better shot here, given that they'll be playing to a jury and not to a judge.
As you mentioned, this one's just getting started, so a lot more to watch there. But let's turn back to the Justice Department. The other big case that it's been pursuing is against JetBlue's purchase of Spirit Airlines under anti-competitive argument. Why does the Justice Department see this as anti-competitive when you have quite a few much bigger airlines that both of these are competing with?
Yeah, it's so interesting because they really are, in the scheme of things in the United States, two small airlines compared to the legacies. But what the Department of Justice is concerned about is that Spirit has a very particular model. It's called an ultra-low-cost carrier, and it offers very low fares for an unbundled product. In other words, just the fare. If you want to check a bag, if you want a drink, if you want some extra legroom, you have to pay for all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, exactly. And some people, rely on that very low fare in order to visit friends or family or go on a vacation. JetBlue is a little bit different. It's kind of a step up. It has bigger seats, a little more legroom, a few more amenities, and it charges higher prices. And JetBlue's made no bones about the fact that it intends, once it buys Spirit, to change those planes, reduce the seating, and increase the fares. So what the Department of Justice is worried about is this ultra-low-cost unbundled option being removed from the market for some consumers that depend on it.
So what is JetBlue saying to try to assuage the Justice Department that this won't be as anti-competitive as it's saying?
JetBlue has a good argument, too. They say, look, first of all, we're really small and we're all struggling to compete against the big guys, Delta, United, American, Southwest. We also bring down fares. We bring down the fares of those really expensive airlines, and we'll be able to expand capacity with Spirit's planes and Spirit's pilots, and we'll pull the fares down when we compete more vigorously against the big legacy airlines. And that's a pro-competitive effect. So this is going to be an interesting trial where the judge is going to have to really look at both sides, the anti-competitive side and the beneficial side and decide which one outweighs the other.
And just quickly, Jen, what do you make so far of the Justice Department's pretty aggressive stance in going after what it sees as anti-competitive, anti-monopoly practices?
It's been good to its word. You know, when the Biden administration came in, there was an executive order in which the administration really encouraged all of the agencies, not just DOJ and FTC, to enforce the antitrust laws, to be, to be careful about consolidation in industries and do what they could to make the economy more competitive. And the DOJ said, hey, we're going to follow through with that. And, it's been good to its word. Instead of settling cases that the DOJ views as problematic, like was really the primary practice in the past, the DOJ has brought quite a few lawsuits, and they are trying to stem the tide of, M&A activity and to stop what they view as anti-competitive conduct by dominant firms. So, they've had mixed success. They've had some success. They've had some failures, but they are doing exactly what they said they would do.
And they've given you a feast of topics
Yes.
to take a look at. Thanks for this, Jen. Great having you on with us. That's Jennifer Rhee, Senior Litigation Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Still ahead on this special holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak, we'll take a look at the story that really matters. The Thanksgiving feast. How much is that turkey and trimmings really costing you this year? It's 50 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg. Welcome back to this special edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. markets are closed for Thanksgiving Day, and we now turn to the story you were really focused on this holiday. Your meal, the turkey, the stuffing, the green bean casserole, grandma's pumpkin pie. How much is it really costing you compared to years past? And how much room is there for seconds with many Americans now on appetite-suppressing drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy? For some answers, we're joined by Dina Shanker, who covers food for Bloomberg News. So this must really be your time of year, Dina. Thanks for being with us. So overall, inflation is slowing. Is the Thanksgiving meal following?
That was not the expectation from Wells Fargo Agri-Food Institute's report that came out last month. Basically, out-of-home eating is just still more expensive, even if that inflation has slowed down. Eating at home is just getting more expensive as certain parts of the supply chain remain elevated. We've seen, for example, canned foods are way up, and that could include your canned pumpkin and your pumpkin pie. It could include canned cranberries, but at the same time, ham prices are up too. All the while, the big centerpiece, the turkey, the prediction was for those prices to come down compared to last year. So that is its own special reason for coming down, because essentially wholesale prices are down from farmers putting too many birds in the barns, and then retailers get to lower their price and consumers win with lower prices. But we make up for it with the other, with the sides and everything else that we want to eat.
So I guess we're getting a little bit of a balance maybe when it comes to the price of the meal compared to years past. But you have to wonder now, with so much attention on these GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy, we talk about it all the time. Is that going to make the Thanksgiving table a little less of a spread than it's been in the past?
So I spoke to a number of people that are taking the GLP-1 drugs, and it was really interesting. Nobody said they were going to serve less dishes, but some people said they were going to make smaller amounts because they're all eating smaller servings. One woman I spoke to said basically she's going to make that sweet potato casserole. She's going to make the green bean casserole, but she barely plans on eating it. It's mostly for her parents, the guests, and she's going to send them home with the leftovers. One woman I spoke to told me that usually in preparation for Thanksgiving, she spends weeks scouring the internet looking for the best recipes, and she's just not thinking about it this year. So she's going to make everything, and she's actually going to even skip her shot so that she can enjoy herself after doing all that work. But all that time that people spend thinking about food in the run-up to Thanksgiving, if you're on one of these drugs, chances are you are not doing all that thinking.
And obviously, one Thanksgiving isn't going to give you a trend, but I have to think a lot of grocery stores, a lot of these big retailers that sell groceries are keeping a really close eye on what happens if there's going to be an Ozempic impact on their bottom lines, depending on what we see this Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to food companies, and they definitely have their eye on it. One of the most interesting points came from Walmart because they have, a pharmacy division and a supermarket division. So they are able to see the overlap there. And they said that the shoppers taking weight loss drugs were buying a little bit less food. Actually, that woman who I just told you about who's skipping her shot, she says her sons noticed that her house doesn't have the same level of snacks that they used to keep around. So it's definitely, it really does have an impact on the people taking it. I think the big question is how many people are going to be taking it at any given time, considering the high cost, considering the lack of availability of the drugs for everybody who wants them. And then also there are side effects from these drugs, and some people don't want to stick with them through the side effects, so they stop taking them.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see just how many leftovers there really are after this Thanksgiving. Thanks for this, Dina. Great having you on with us. That's Bloomberg News food reporter Dina Schenker. And thanks as well to Jennifer Rhee of Bloomberg Intelligence, Bert Flickinger of Strategic Resource Group, and our oil panel, John Kilduff at Again Capital and Stephen Short of The Short Group. Special thanks to you as well for joining us on this Thanksgiving holiday. I'm Nathan Hager. Stay with us. Today's top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now.